What's going on, everybody, and welcome to my review of Heart Eyes, released in 2025. I honestly didn't know what to expect going into this one. I hadn't seen any trailers beforehand, so I went in pretty blind. All I really knew was that it was supposed to be some kind of slasher meets rom-com kind of deal, which can either be a really fun surprise or a total mess depending on how it's handled. And considering how hit or miss horror comedies can be, especially when you try to mix romance into the already tricky balance of scares and laughs, I was kind of bracing for something mediocre or forgettable. But to my surprise, Heart Eyes actually ended up being a really enjoyable ride. From the moment it kicked off, it had this slick, confident energy to it that I honestly wasn't anticipating. The tone felt surprisingly self-assured, like the filmmakers knew exactly what kind of movie they were making, and for the most part, they really leaned into it. The pacing was tight, the presentation was stylish, and the mix of horror and humor, at least throughout the first two acts, was way better balanced than I thought it would be. It's not perfect, and I do have a few gripes I'll get into, but it definitely kept me entertained the whole way through and left a much stronger impression than I ever would have expected from a film like this. The story follows Allie McCabe, played by Olivia Holt, a jaded branding designer, and her upbeat co-worker J. Simmons Mason Gooding, who get mistakenly targeted by a Valentine's Day serial killer known as Heart Eyes. The killer has a thing for hunting down couples, and Allie and Jay, despite not actually being together, end up running for their lives across Seattle. As they try to survive, dodge the killer, and deal with the chaos around them, they grow closer and uncover more than they bargained for, especially when the truth behind the killer is revealed. To begin with the positives, there's actually quite a lot that works here. First and foremost, the two leads are really solid. Olivia Holt and Mason Gooding have excellent chemistry, and their dynamic is what anchors the whole movie. Holt plays Allie with this snarky, no-nonsense energy that's really easy to root for, while Gooding brings a natural charm and warmth to Jay that makes him instantly likable. Their interactions feel genuine, and the film gives them enough space to actually develop their relationship, which is rare in horror films like this. Even with all the chaos going on around them, their connection feels grounded and believable. And that goes a long way in keeping the audience emotionally invested. It's also just refreshing to watch a horror movie where the main characters don't feel like one-note archetypes there to fill a body count. They're likable, they have depth, and you actually care whether they make it out alive, which gives the horror elements more weight when things inevitably go south. And speaking of the horror elements, the killer design is another big win for the movie. Heart Eyes is creepy, stylish, and just unique enough to stand out in a genre that's overflowing with masked murderers. The heart-shaped mask is unsettling, without crossing over into parody, and it ties into the Valentine's Day theme in a way that feels clever instead of gimmicky. The opening scene especially deserves a shout-out. It's bloody, creative, and immediately pulls you into the movie. It's the kind of opening that sets the tone right away. It's intense, well executed, and stylishly shot. You can tell the filmmakers put effort into making a strong first impression, and it worked. From there, the kills throughout the film continue to deliver. They're brutal, but not in a way that feels over the top or mean-spirited. Each one feels like it has impact, and they're shot in a way that's more stylish than exploitative. Another area where the film really shines is in its cinematography. Visually, this movie has a slick, almost neon-soaked aesthetic that gives it a heightened, moody vibe. There's a lot of attention paid to lighting and color, especially reds, pinks, and purples, to help reinforce the Valentine's Day atmosphere, and it works really well in making the film feel visually distinct. Even during quieter moments, the movie looks polished and cohesive, with just enough edge to keep it interesting. It's clear that a lot of care went into how the film looks, and that effort pays off. Now, not everything worked quite as well, so let's talk about some of the negatives. While I really enjoyed the mystery and the build-up surrounding the killer's identity, the actual reveal didn't quite land for me. Without getting into spoilers, it just didn't land with the kind of emotional or narrative punch I think it was aiming for. The motive felt a little thin, and the reveal itself didn't feel as shocking or impactful as it probably should have. After all the suspense and setup, the resolution came off a bit underwhelming. It didn't ruin the movie or anything, but it was definitely one of those moments where I went, "Oh, that's it." Another issue I had was with how the tone started to shift in the second half. The first half of the movie struck a great balance between horror and humor, with just the right amount of comedy sprinkled in to break the tension without undermining the scares. But once the midpoint hits, the comedy starts ramping up, and sometimes it ramps up a bit too much. There were still plenty of funny moments that landed, don't get me wrong, but a lot of the humor started to feel forced and overly broad. Certain side characters, who were fine in small doses, suddenly got a lot more screen time and began to feel kind of grating. Their exaggerated personalities began to overshadow the main story, and as a result, the movie lost a bit of its tension and focus.
Get killed, all right?
What was...
Why would he say that?
It's one of those cases where the movie feels like it's trying a little too hard to be funny, and in doing so, it undercuts some of the horror elements that had been working really well earlier on. It's not a complete tonal collapse, but it is noticeable, and it pulled me out of the experience a few times. I wish the film had just dialed back the comedy a bit in the final act and leaned more into the suspense it had been building. Still, even with those flaws, Heart Eyes managed to leave a really solid impression. It's got all the right ingredients for a fun, fast-paced slasher, with just enough of a unique twist to make it stand out from the crowd. The strong chemistry between the leads gives the movie an emotional core that a lot of horror comedies lack, and even when the plot stumbles a bit, the energy and visual style help keep things moving. The horror elements are effective when they need to be, and the comedy, at least early on, enhances the experience rather than distracts from it. So overall, Heart Eyes really surprised me in a good way. I wasn't expecting much, but what I got was a stylish, entertaining horror comedy with likable characters, a cool and creepy killer, and just enough personality to set itself apart. It's not without its issues. The third act gets a little too silly, and the reveal doesn't quite stick the landing, but even with those drawbacks, I still had a genuinely good time watching it. If you're into genre mashups, or you're just looking for something a little different for your next horror night, I definitely recommend checking it out. I'm giving Heart Eyes a solid 8 out of 10. So, what do you guys think of this movie? Do you love it, think it's just okay, or maybe even dislike it? I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to comment below. Please like, subscribe, and share this video. I really appreciate your support. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.